Welcome, thanks for joining us. And I'm here talking to Martha Lane-Fox today in the offices of Everyone. Martha, thanks for joining us. And last year you launched Everyone. I wonder if you'd just tell us a little bit about what that's for, what you hope to achieve out of that, and how you're going to go about doing it.
Everyone is a new public organisation, and we are going to champion the leap the UK could make into the network age. And by that I mean, rather than digital increments, so improving things slowly, improving the quality of our infrastructure, the quality of our public services, transformation, and what the UK would look like if we really embraced the internet at all levels of society for everyone.
Yeah, you talk about the UK becoming the kind of world's leading network economy by kind of 2025, and I wonder what do you mean by that? What is a network?
Well, I think actually just today the EU came out with some numbers looking at how each country in Europe is progressing towards kind of digital nirvana, and Denmark is leading Europe, and the UK is what they called a lagging ahead. And by that they meant the UK has got some great fundamentals. We've got highest percentage of e-commerce in the world. We've got okay infrastructure. We've got pretty good digital government, but there are huge areas where we still need to embed the internet in how we organise ourselves. And I think that's what I mean about the network age. If you think not just about how the internet is slowly changing industries, but when you imagine everybody able to use the internet, everybody with fast access to infrastructure, how does that then shift what society is able to do? What does education look like? What does health look like? And I think the UK could really lead the world in making that kind of depth of understanding and use of the internet just a normalcy for everybody in the country.
So what's holding us up? What's standing in our way from doing that?
A huge number of different factors. The three areas we're focusing on are around gender balance, which I think is holding us up, about skills, that's another area being held up, and about reinvention of public services. And by public, I mean in the broadest sense, from public institutions to public sector. But then we also have some other things. Our infrastructure still needs much more universal improvements. Just today on the radio, we're talking about BT and Openreach and the broadband situation in this country, and there are still huge areas which are not spots. There are still areas of London which are not spots. So there isn't one single thing. I wish it was that easy, but it's about pushing across lots of different areas to keep championing what the UK could be.
So how do we make that, given there's such a breadth of issues there, how do we make that kind of progress and the speed that we need to make it when it's across so many issues?
That's why I think Everyone has an important role, because to me there are lots of voices coming from the west coast of Silicon Valley about how the advantage of all these technologies, whether it's Google or whether it's Facebook or whatever it might be. But we don't have that many voices who are representing everyone, us citizens, not just as consumers, but as people, paid up members of society and the human race. And I think that's what Everyone is going to focus on predominantly, is making sure we champion what it means for, some much older person living in some incredibly remote part of the UK as much as for the metropolitan elite, for some person who is teaching in a school as much as for somebody who is leading an organisation. And those things, I think, are as important. So Everyone is going to be really, really, really challenging us to think about making sure there's a universality of usage around the internet and how we embed it in our structures in society.
The digital strategy is due to come out soon. I know you've made some contributions to that, and I wondered what sort of things are you hoping to see come out of that, and do you think those can be part of the kind of leverage to get to the place you're hoping to get?
Absolutely. Digital strategy is something that government's producing, and I think that the government has done a great job in supporting a huge number of important initiatives, from encouraging much more entrepreneurship and digital entrepreneurship, in particular technology startups. We're really indexing very highly in terms of companies being started and access to capital. But we've also a huge programme of work in government, transforming how government itself does services, and both of those things need to continue. But they're only really the start, and I think there could be a much bolder vision around making a leap as opposed to, as I say, moving in increments towards a digital future. So I would like to see a continued focus on infrastructure. I started my working life as a consultant, and in 1994 I was sent to Seoul, where there was a better broadband and fibre network than we have in much of the UK nearly 22 years later. So it's incredibly important to keep that focus and ambition on infrastructure. I would love to see them put completely different focus on skills. 12 million adults in this country can still not do 6 things online that those of us who use it every day would take for granted. And imagine what a huge barrier that is to getting work, saving money, being connected. So I think there's lots and lots of areas that the government could make big leaps.
The skills thing is fascinating, I think, and particularly with the government's focus now on apprenticeships and that whole skills base. And in talking to the universities, so kind of the other part of that, often you hear back from the university space that actually it's the staff that have the digital challenge, not the learners there. And I just wonder whether you think there's an opportunity for the kind of FE apprenticeship space actually to kind of steal a march and to push ahead with those kind of real skills in a digital context that we lack.
You're absolutely right, but I think there's lots of different strands there. So for me, a couple of things I'd say. Firstly, it's not just about the very old, the very poor, the people living in remote bits of the UK. You're absolutely right. There's still often a big digital skills challenge in people who just have not grown up with the internet, as I have. I was today in South Maudsley Hospital. I've been doing some work in the NHS, and one of the things I recommended to the Secretary of State was that everybody in the NHS should be given basic digital skills training, because how incredibly frustrating, annoying, difficult if you're a doctor being constantly told to use different digital initiatives, but actually you might not necessarily know very much about the internet. And I think that can be as true if you're an MP, true if you're a teacher, true if you're a consumer, a citizen. So I think we need to constantly reinvent and reimagine skills, and that's true in the FE and the HE sector as well. You know, academics who have grown up in the academic or an institution might not necessarily have had the exposure to some of this stuff, and will need help in understanding it and exploring it.
I was really interested in your point about the gender balance, and I was reflecting back to a colleague today, actually, in the space that we work in, how male-dominated it is in a technology space, and I wonder how do we change that? How do we get away from that kind of geekdom kind of piece around technology and get more women involved in it? And at what point does that start? How do we make that kind of change?
I think it's one of the most breathtakingly astonishing facts to me that this sector, the internet sector, that didn't exist 30 years ago, has replicated nearly entirely the hierarchies of the old industries. It's unbelievable to me. I feel as though I've been sort of asleep while this has happened. And as a young woman who started in her career in the internet, I thought, this is incredible. It's going to be democratizing, redistributive. It's going to be one of these amazing tools to empower new voices, and that has not happened. There are fewer women as a percentage in the internet sector than there are in Parliament. And obviously Parliament is a bastion of modernity that was invented just a few months ago. So it's a profoundly important issue, because money, power, influence, all of the industries of the future are going to be based around internet network technologies. So I think that it is becoming at least more known, more talked about. There is a bigger emphasis than I have certainly seen in the last 5 years on this issue. Companies such as Google are publishing their diversity stats, Intel doing a big push around it, so there are huge tech platforms who are beginning to take this seriously and be transparent in the size of the challenge that they face. But I think we need to do some very practical and bold things as well. Not everyone is doing 2 strands of work. There are others, but these are the 2 we're focusing on. Firstly, encouraging more female entrepreneurship just in not-for-profits and for-profits by doing big matchmaking events where we bring different investors from all over the place to meet women from different backgrounds than perhaps they would normally get exposure to in their networks. And secondarily, we want to launch a program where we help women who are currently out of work, either unemployed or temporarily taken time out from work, to get digital skills to get back into the workforce in a highly skilled role. And obviously, as Chancellor of the Open University, I think there's an opportunity to create an interesting course that could help women get back into work. We're just not being smart in how we think about this. 800,000 women not working, 600,000 jobs empty in the tech sector in the UK. Why aren't we joining these up? You know, I say all the time now to young women or girls that ask me advice about how they should think about their careers. I can't code, but if I was starting now, I would learn it for no other reason than you will always be employable. Don't think it's the only thing. Don't think it means you should study computer science all through school, but my God, it gives you an edge. So I think we've got to start just doing some practical things that show the change, and talking about it and monitoring it, and relentlessly focusing on it, because it's profoundly important.
So it's part of, we talk a lot about STEM subjects and and girls at school in terms of their engagement. Is that one of the places where that starts? Or is
yes,
that
it starts at school, but I don't think we can wait for school. I think the government did put coding on the curriculum, which might help, hopefully. Need to back that up with real execution and also training the teachers. But it certainly is a kind of philosophical shift that's extremely helpful. But it's not just about school. I studied ancient history, and I would have thought it is possible to be much more focused on STEAM, not just STEM, so encourage arts and engineering to come together. I think that will appeal to women and men, and hopefully encourage more women into the sector as well. So STEM is an issue, you're absolutely right, but it's not the only piece. School is an issue, but it's not the only bit. And I think if we only focus on one bit of the whole chain of a woman's career or their life cycle, then I think we won't be as smart as we can about solving the problem.
Is there anything about the kind of culture of technology-based companies that gets women to kind of drop out of them at a point? I mean, I don't know if that's being a simplistic kind of view.
No, I mean, of course, I think that one of the things that's just, again, extraordinary to me as somebody that started off in this sector a long time ago, we never imagined that those platform-based businesses would grow so quickly. When we started lastminute.com, there was no Google, there was no Facebook, none of these West Coast organizations that just went whoosh, zero cost margin businesses that swooped over the whole web. Not because they're evil, because they have brilliant business models and because we all use them. The idea that there would be one company which could basically make or break the fortune of your online business, i.e. Google, was kind of extraordinary if you'd said that back in the late 90s. So those cultures came from a very strong engineering-based culture, and those engineers are men because for a whole load of other cultural reasons through the 80s that become male domain. So I think that does spread. It doesn't mean that they are companies only populated by men, but if you have that, as you say, geeky, I don't like that expression, but engineering-based culture at the top of an organization, then I do think you hire slightly in your shadow, you respond to people that look a bit like you, you're always looking for other software engineers because that's what makes your businesses grow. There are no women, so then that becomes a whole cycle. So yes, it's a really important element of it, which again is why we must train a huge cohort of women to be able to be software engineers.
Because you've talked quite a bit about looking for investment in a kind of digital skills fund. In terms of trying to aid that skills development. Is that another part of that toolkit?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think skills is a long spectrum, isn't it? And the thing I've talked about that I think is perhaps one of the biggest wins for the country is enabling those 12 million adults who don't have basic digital skills. Because we know that 1 million of those people are not in work, and yet 90% of new jobs require or are only advertised online, let alone the jobs that require digital skills. We know that people are therefore able to interact with government more if they are able to be online and save money that way. There's a huge gain both to the individual and to us as a society. And so I would love to see much deeper investment in skills from the government because it pays off. We've estimated it would cost, definitely not more than around $1 billion to train a huge number of that 12 million, and the gains are massive. We've said anywhere between 18 billion if you look just at small businesses being online through to 76 billion if you take that whole cohort. So that's why I think it's a kind of no-brainer in terms of investment.
You mentioned the Open University where you're Chancellor, and the OU's done some extraordinary things in recent times in terms of learning and how technology is employed in that regard. What do you see as kind of new and exciting coming out of that space? A little while ago, people were talking about MOOCs a lot and the whole Future Learn as a kind of process. Is that something that you see continuing and developing? Is that part of the big shift in education? Yeah,
I mean, I think the OU is the original edtech business, isn't it? It's kind of incredible that it was an edtech business before the internet even existed back in the late 60s, and their kind of absolute focus on high quality individual tutorial-led system is extremely rare, and in this world where basically you can have a mass of information and you can get tutorials, MOOCs, or even just a kind of snippet of information from anywhere, it's still an incredibly powerful model to move people up the chain into a qualification, into a certification, into an academic degree. So I think the OU has a real rigor at its heart that should be protected alongside an absolute universality. So a belief that anyone, anywhere should be able to learn on their own terms over whatever time frame, however they want to do it. Those two things are remarkable. that's my pitch for the OU over. And I think that we haven't even seen the beginning of what technology will do for education, you know, in the classroom, for distance learning, personalisation. So the OU has got some brilliant technologies that are helping people learn. So watching how you scan a page and then being able to assimilate information so that you pick it up more easily for you, through to then the credible kind of big data studies about how you're benchmarking according to other people and why it might be that your studies aren't going as successfully, and what you can learn from that kind of amassing of lots and lots of learners' data. So we're really at the beginning of all of this stuff, and there are some incredible developments out there, both sort of on the back end of learning, if you like, i.e. using the data part, but also on the front end, so for you as the learner and what you might expect. But as always, it feels sometimes as though there's this incredible world over here of EdTech, and then there's the mass of the education system, and joining those two up, I think, is a big challenge.
Yeah, so I think just we kind of feel that education is perhaps on the brink of having a major transformational piece, you know, through technology, and it's quite interesting that's the kind of view that you've had there. I mean, many other industries, entertainment and publishing have already kind of been through that sort of revolution, and I just wondered whether where you think that breakthrough might come in terms of education. There's a lot of work in English FE at the moment, which will result in quite a transformational change for that sort of landscape, and whether you might see that as a kind of something at the vanguard of using technology in a fundamentally different way to how it's been used so far.
Yes, I think that, again, it won't be any one place. I think that some of the things I find interesting are the kind of organising of schools. So Ian Livingstone, who started Dungeons and Dragons, then Tomb Raider, an incredible entrepreneur and game specialist, has just been awarded two free schools from two new academies, and he's going to build a classroom based around the internet and build a curriculum around STEAM, so putting arts into engineering and technology education. And he very much believes that the brightest kid in the class should be the teacher, and that the role of teacher needs to change. And so I think those kinds of developments about learning are really interesting. So it's less about the tech, but how you use the tools of the tech.
Yes, absolutely. And lastly, right at the beginning, you talked about kind of reinventing public service, with technology, and I wonder how you see that. What does that look like in a few years' time? How's that going to be so different?
Well, I think one of the major things that Everyone will continue to champion is the huge gains that we can make as a country if we think about health technology, education technology, not just as these kind of incredible innovative startups over here, but actually embedding it at the core of our public sector. We've got a strong sense of social justice in this country, an incredible kind of social contract between citizen and state, but that needs to change and shift. We need to be able to skill up the incredible people that work in the public sector to take advantage of these technologies, to skill up citizens to be able to have more information, whether it's on their own health needs or their own education needs. And then we need to be able to transform services end to end. So gov.uk and the Government Digital Service, of which I was a part, have done an incredible job at taking either not very good digital services and making them better, or simplifying and making transactions better for citizens. But they haven't had the opportunity to do that kind of end-to-end look at something, and that's what I find fascinating. So when you look at community nursing and you looked at the end-to-end process for the nurse, for the patient, how does that get changed when you use the internet as the organising principle? Because that's what I believe. I think the internet is the organising principle of our age. I think it is the nervous system of the 21st century, and it's not that it is going to be a digital-only world, not that at all, but it will be the thing around which we are providing products and services. So that's how I think we need to reimagine our public sector.
Perfect. Thank you so much for talking to us. It's been
Pleasure.
fascinating. Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Thank you.